Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon, or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode.
Oh, loyal listeners, tonight's episode is too good for you. Why? Because you're getting 2 guests and an extra long episode for the price of 1. Tonight, we talk to James Annitto and Carl Johnson from Duo Daemonologie about demons.
Your mother's in here with us. Would you like to leave a message? I see that she gets it.
You can find them on Facebook at Duo Daemonologie, DuoDaemonologie, or online at www.demonology.org.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
We have a double treat tonight, 2 for 1. We have James Annitto and Carl Johnson of Duo Daemonologie. That's not double trouble unless you're a demon, so it's good for you guys. So welcome to the show, James. Welcome to the show, Carl.
Thank you for having us on. Yes.
You guys both kind of have different paths. Carl, you're a little bit older than James. You actually have really almost an iconic path in demonology. So I want to actually get your kind of origin story. I'll start with you first, Carl, and then I'll go to you, James. So, Carl, mind telling us kind of how you started? It's a very interesting story, and it's kind of related to the Warrens and the Conjuring franchise.
It's my brother's fault. He got me into it. Told him, in a way that's true because my parents' house was subject to paranormal activity. It was haunted. Not every, most days were business as usual, but there were freaky things going on there. And I'm talking about when we were like adolescents, just getting into our teens. And I decided to move my bedroom downstairs. We had a twin bedroom because we're identical twins. I wanted my own pad. I wanted my own place, because he made noises at night like breathing. It was unacceptable. And so I went downstairs and set up my own room down there with a nice comfy bed. And, well, we had long heard noises coming from that basement area. Now I was down in the cellar and I was hearing those near me. So confirmation that something strange was going on in that house. So that's how I became interested in paranormal pursuits. I said, if that's happening here, I don't know what we've done. What caused it? Why is there seemingly a ghost here? A few years later, my sister and I began playing on a Ouija board, a spirit board, and that seemed to increase the activity. So I was kind of hooked on investigating and reading about these strange things. And to that purpose, I attended a lecture given at Rhode Island College in Providence, and the speakers, I'd heard about them. they weren't quite as renowned then. Ed and Lorraine Warren, billed as the famous ghost hunting couple. And so, I've got to see these people. This is out of the ordinary. So it was April 1972. I was 17 years of age. I went to see Ed and Lorraine, and I was thinking, that's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be like those guys. Mr. Warren had some audience participation. He asked several questions. He asked, has anyone here ever seen a ghost? So I kind of shyly raised my hand. He said, anybody ever spoken to a ghost? I raised my hand again. Said, anybody ever done a magic ritual, ceremony? So I raised my hand up fully. He said, come up here, young man.
Wow.
Well, I hope I have something to say. So I actually became a little part of that lecture. And I was in touch with the Warrens after that. But that same evening of the lecture, I was invited to join a group based at the college, PIRO, Parapsychological Investigatory and Research Organization. It rolls right off the tongue. And I became a member of that, even though I was the youngest member. And my brother joined too. And at this club, this group at the college, we were looking into residential situations. We wanted to get into residential. We started out with exterior settings, like a ruined church, and organ music was heard coming from that church. We went to explore that. Went on a field trip to there's actually a field in North Scituate, the Johnston line, where people were seeing UFOs. So we wanted to branch out into residential, go to people's houses who had claims of hauntings. To that effect, my brother placed an ad in the local periodical. It was in North County Observer paper. He placed an ad advertising PIRO, that we existed. We don't charge for our services. We'd like to come and help you understand. We'll evaluate your suspected haunting. So 3 weeks to the day after that ad was published, we were contacted, our team was contacted by Mrs. Carolyn Perron. She and her husband had 2 years before bought a farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Strange things were going on. House was built in 1736, and they invited us to come and explore their house. And Mrs. Perron even came to the college to be interviewed by us. So we went out there and did our investigation, which was scientific to the best of our abilities. We were taking photographs and audio recording and interviewing. So they had a situation there, the Perron's family, Carolyn and Roger Perron and their 5 daughters. So we went there twice to investigate, and I think it was my brother's idea. We decided to call in, or not so much call in, but alert Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were living in Monroe, Connecticut, to let them know about this. And it's not that we felt we were in over our heads. We weren't scared or anything. We just thought we could benefit from the Warrens' vast experience. Give us some advice on this, if you run into these things. So I placed the call to Mr. Warren, and he volunteered them to come over. He said, well, Lorraine and I will be there. And I said, well, thank you very much. This is very prestigious. And I asked Ed Warren, I said, now I understand we'll be working on this case together. He said, oh, absolutely. I said, well, I'll send you our case files. Please do that. So this was between August and September of 1973. Mr. and Mrs. Warren journeyed to Harrisville, Rhode Island. I remember greeting them at the doorway because we were quite familiar with the parents of the family. Carolyn Perron gave Ed and Lorraine Warren a tour of their house. And so we'd had what we considered a successful investigation. But suddenly that was changed into an intervention, you might say, or an intercession, because Ed and Lorraine took over that tape. And I was not to see the Perron family members for another 40 years.
Wow.
Well, I would see Andrea Perron. I would see the eldest daughter. The rest of the family, I just out of touch with them. No falling out, just didn't see them. Carolyn Perron and I were on the phone every day for a couple of weeks, and I ceased hearing from her. And Mrs. Perron, after we didn't hear anything from them for 16 days, we thought, well, it must be the Warrens are very involved in this case, or maybe it's cleared up their activity, which I didn't find disturbing, but the parents sure did. They had to live with it. So after 16 days, Carolyn Perron placed a call to me. She apologized for having been out of touch, but she told me that Ed and Lorraine Warren told her and Roger they could be of no assistance unless they were the only paranormal investigators on the case. We were just a bunch of college kids. All we could do was get in the way, and they were the experts. The Warrens weren't investigating that house. Carolyn explained their procedures to me. So that's when it became an intercession, because Mrs. Warren pronounced the house haunted, that it was demon infested. So the objectivity is gone. But I don't regret that. We had a good time while we were investigating the house. It was very, very informative, and I look back on it fondly those times.
Did you have a relationship with the Warrens after that case, or was there kind of like you felt like it got taken out of the picture, so you didn't communicate with them too much after that?
No, I only on the phone after that and seeing them at lectures. We kind of lost that camaraderie after that, because I actually went out and lectured with Ed and Lorraine Warren twice. I went on the road with them, and the Warrens came over and they had dinner at my parents' house. That's my best memory of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Oh.
My parents and the Warrens hit it off. The Johnsons and Warrens hit that off right away, and had a good time. I did a demonstration magic ritual for Ed, because I thought, well, why not do that for him? And I would be on the phone with them and see them from time to time. But the real communication that we had, which was like a burgeoning friendship with them, I thought it was a friendship, that dropped with their involvement in the parents' case.
The new owners of the Conjuring house you're familiar with, did you participate in the seance that was done there last fall, or have you been there since then and with anyone else?
How do you know these things? Who told you about that seance?
I've been stalking you.
Oh, no. Yes, I did participate in the seance. In fact, the seance was pretty much my suggestion, that I said, well, we won't have anybody that's too sensitive or influenced here, but let's see what happens. It's got an eerie vibe. I don't think it's what it was. It depends on who's residing there. They host Jen and Corey Heinzen. They host a lot of paranormal investigations in that house. People pay a fee and can investigate. I don't find it ominous. I don't find anything evil about it, or I'm not apprehensive when I'm there. It just feels welcoming. I mean, I won't say it feels warm and rosy. It's an eerie vibe to that house. A lot of memories in that house. But I just feel welcome. I feel welcome there. Some people don't have such a good experience. It might have something to do with the attitude people have when they come in there. But it's just it's a cozy, haunted house. And I get along famously. My other partner, Elise Giamacco Carlson, we go there sometimes, and it's just welcome. And James can attest. I think James feels the same way. When he goes to that house, he's never felt like it doesn't want him there. It's just kind of nice and eerie and haunted history. And some people run out of there scared. I just never felt motivated to run out of there. It's a nice feeling.
It's actually a good segue to James. So James, we'll start first there. You've been to that house. What was because when I went to the house, I went during the day and I was with a couple people and there was a psychic medium there, and he, like, as soon as he stepped out the ground, the land he felt was more, was more haunted than the house. Did you pick up anything when you were there, James?
Yeah, definitely. I think Carl pretty adequately about what his interpretation of the house is. I definitely think it's either welcoming or menacing towards the individual that goes there. I definitely think there's a lot to the land. Of course, if people were actually buried on the land, and of course, a lot of the myths and folklore about the surroundings of Burrowville, if are true, could entice the fact that the land is the issue. And of course, with all the people focused on the paranormal since the Perrons, even Norma Sutcliffe, who was the previous owner before the Heinzens, had some inclusion of the paranormal involved, especially because Ghost Hunters did an episode there. People forget that. So I think with a lot of this smorgasbord of like all this combination of this paranormal phenomena idea, I think that it generates the house to be active depending on the individual. And like Carl said, I've never had a bad experience there. When I used to drink alcohol, I had been there a few times for parties, and I felt comfortable enough to be able to lower my guard, kind of have that kind of lifestyle there. And I don't understand where people find it negative, but I can also understand if you're going in there. A good story is Andre Courier, who is a good friend of mine, good friend of Carl's, and that's actually how we met. He's no longer with us. He passed away in December, but he was actually the co-founder of my very first paranormal group called Ghost Hunters of Supernatural Truth. And him and a few people had a bad experience at the Conjuring house. The story of people, there was one predominant story in that house where they paid for the night, and they were only there for an hour or so, and they left, not even asking for a refund. And that was actually their group, because what happened is that, Carl can attest to this, and I don't want to speak bad of Andre, but Andre is no longer with us, so he can't defend himself, but it's the truth, is that he was known for provoking spirits or provoking the locations he was in, and he was always wanting to push the envelope. And from what I understand, they did that night, and they weren't there very long because something came forth to them and kind of pushed them out. Of course, I wasn't there, nor Carla was there, but that was the experience that I've heard. And I actually was sent the recorder they used that night, and I have a whole paper right to the right of me that's covered by one of my son's drawings, where it actually they were sworn at. They said "F you" and some other things through this digital recorder. I haven't listened to the digital recorder yet because for some reason I cannot find it, which is weird. And but yeah, they had bad experience there. But they also Andre went in there provoking, so I can understand why they had that experience.
Now you're an ordained deacon and a demonologist, so you're very a religious person, if I can make that assumption. What is your thoughts about people saying the land is cursed from the Indians? Do you believe in curses?
Well, I think curses linger as in the form if people believe in it. It's like a power of prayer. If you don't pray and many people aren't praying, there's not this collective consciousness thought pattern that goes out. Curses to me are more of a thought form kind of thing, like a thought pattern. If it's passed down by individuals, then it tends to stay, because if nobody started talking about that curse, then how would we know the curse would be there? So it's passed down by folklore or passed down by word of mouth from a family member, or some sort of, like I said, folklore that's been passed down. But to say the land's cursed, I truly don't know when that would have happened. Everybody likes to point at the Native Americans, says, oh, they cursed the land, they cursed this. That could be true, but once again, is that when, of course, the white men started first talking to the Native Americans, there was definitely a language barrier, and I think there was also some form of superstition involved with the communication as well. So I don't know if the land is cursed. There's no documentation to ever prove Native American tribe ever cursed that land. So I think that is more kind of a subjective thought when it comes to that.
Yeah, that land, that area was one of the stages for King Philip's War.
Yeah.
Between 1670 and 1674.
There was a lot of bloodshed.
Yeah. Per capita, per person, per unit, that was the bloodiest conflict in American history.
It was a little off the land, though. It wasn't that close to the house.
I mean, I'm sure they cursed the white settlers, and I'm sure the white settlers prayed down the vengeance of Jehovah on them. But if they cursed the land, they cursed all of Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And which could explain our political situation.
Well, it's not good there.
Really, all of North America is an Indian burial ground. So
yeah, true.
So I don't think there's any lingering formal curse there.
Yeah, like I said, it could be like a subconscious thing. People think about it, and that's what it's like when you say like the Conjuring house has a demon, or Bobby Mackey's has a demon, or the Hinsdale house has a demon, or the Malvern Manor has a demon, Basilica Axe Murder House has a demon, and so on and so on. This lingers in people's minds, and so when people go there, for some individuals, not like Carl and I, because we know
a little more objective,
a little bit more objective in our approach. We don't go with that kind of thought pattern, but a lot of people do. They think the Conjuring house is one of the most haunted houses and most evil houses in the country, when in fact, like Carl and I just said, it's one of the most homiest houses we've ever been to.
I mean, evil haunting is when it's inconvenient. If it's scary, it's inconvenient. If it's inconvenient to somebody, it's evil.
Yeah, because they don't understand it. It's fear.
Mm-hmm. And that house in Harrisville, they call it the Round Top Farm, the Conjuring house, that's billed as the most haunted house in America. Yeah, probably in North America. Well, it is when something's happened.
Yeah,
just like Tavern on Main restaurant in Chepachet, Rhode Island.
Good food.
Long City, established in the early 1800s. Good food. That's the most haunted dwelling or business when the most haunted tavern, when something's happening.
Yeah.
When a shadow figure appears there, or the little boy comes out and runs around, then it is. But that's usually not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 1 mile down the street from the S.K. Pierce Victorian Haunted Mansions. So and when I did a documentary, I mean, we filmed some stuff in there. So yeah, so that has its moments too of some crazy stuff going on.
Sure it does.
Well, Carl and I have been going there since before Edwin and Lillian, and then of course Edwin and Lillian time frame, and then of course there's
Gonzalez. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then I always forget the dentist's names, but I've always known Marion. Marion's always been my contact. Besides when I used to go over there and had coffee with Edwin, but. Yeah, that's a beautiful house. I love that house. I love what they've done to that house. But yeah, I've had some experiences at that house for sure. But another thing, it's not evil either. Like Edwin and Lillian tried to make it as at one point, you know?
Yeah. There's supposed to be a lot of portals in that house.
Well, a lot of holes in the walls if that qualifies as portals.
Yeah. I would just a quick side note. A friend, I think all of ours, and we probably are familiar with, Ken Watson. He's kind of going through a little bit of a hard time right now with his health. So thoughts and prayers to Ken. Ken was he's the historian there, and he was the guy that kind of did all the interior work. So Ken Watson and Mimi Watson. So there was Marion, who was when I was there. I contacted Marion to actually film in the house. And when I went there, I interviewed Ken and Mimi because Ken was the one that was like doing a lot of the renovation of the inside of the house, and Mimi helped him out too. And she was like the resident medium. So I do want to get back real quickly. So James, you had a different path. I mean, you started young too, but you were doing it kind of alone. You've been doing this since you were 15. But unlike Carl, you weren't part of a team or you didn't have a twin brother. You started off on your own and would go to graveyards and read books and explore local haunts. Want to give us the quick backstory of how you got there and to where you became an ordained deacon and a demonologist today?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it wasn't as cool of a story. I did not move into my basement because, I would have never done so because after watching Home Alone and having the boiler scene where the furnace was talking like he was so scared. That frightened me for a while to go down in the basement. But yeah, I never grew up with the haunting. I never grew up with that ideology of there could be ghosts. What I grew up with was a hatred for a higher power or disdain for a higher power because of the childhood.
Disdain's a good way to put it.
The childhood upbringing that I definitely was kind of dealt in my life. I was abandoned on the side of the street by my biological father, but I was adopted by, of course, my grandparents. And my grandmother was Mommy Dearest. If anybody's ever watched that movie, then they would understand that reference.
Yeah.
So they were Lutheran, though, and they would go to church every Sunday, so I'd go to Bible study. So I was always told I was abandoned and I was never good enough. I can't do this good enough kind of mindset. So I grew up with that disdain of God, like, okay, I'm going to Bible study. God's so great. Why did I go through this? Like, I was 4 years old when I was adopted. And, of course, learning how to read around like 7 or 8 years old and starting to understand literature. And I got very influenced by science. And then shows like Unsolved Mysteries out.
Oh, yeah.
Tales of the Crypt, hell, even Scooby-Doo. And then Scariest Places on Earth was a precursor to Ghost Hunters and Most Haunted. So I was very intrigued by these shows, and I'm very intrigued by things such as Darwinism, like the biological theory of evolution or natural selection, survival of the fittest. So that always fascinated me. So I got into watching these programs, reading these books like Hans Holzer, things like Harry Price, Charles Dickens, like A Christmas Carol, and so many other full-fledged books about paranormal phenomenon, even though maybe it was coined differently. Preternatural forces, superstition. And I was very enthralled into it, reading this and watching it. So about 14 years old, on the cusp of 15, I would say about a few months before I was 15, I got with a bunch of group of buddies and started investigating legendary and local surroundings because of a show called Ghost Hunters. The man that sits next to me right now was on the first 2 seasons. But when I first started seeing people in Rhode Island do it, that's what was kind of like the pushing forward of investigating these claims. Because I thought, and I was still very agnostic at 14, 15 years old, I thought that if I could investigate life after death, of course also life beyond Earth with ufology, and then of course I was also very big into Loch Ness and Bigfoot. I thought if I could research these and investigate these subjects in person as a reality subject, then I could figure out if God existed. And that's really what kind of got me into the paranormal. And then to fast forward a little bit, I was in the military for a short period of time. I served a year, and then I was medically discharged. While I was in the military, I had this faith change. I started believing in God again. I was at this church. I would go to church every Sunday to get away from cleaning barracks, and it would be every different kind of church. It would be temples, Baptist church, Lutheran church. And then I came across the Church of Christ, where I was trying to nigger away, trying to get some sleep in, like I used to always do. And they asked who would be like to be baptized. And I felt this like light shine upon me, like this sudden urge to raise my hand. And I got baptized that day. And my whole perspective of myself changed in 180. I went from being agnostic to reading the Bible, praying before bed. And it was a 180 for me. And, when I got medically discharged, I feel like if I did not find that faith, I would have committed suicide because I was very depressed that I was medically discharged. My family's a lifer. Carl Vittardo, or Carl Williams at the time, was the first Navy officer in the Navy, and that's significant. Her husband, my step-grandfather, was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. My biological grandfather was in 3 different branches, and it long lineage of military. So I felt like a failure. So having that faith, I recovered from that depression fad. When I got back from the military, I got back into paranormal investigating, and basically was kind of like the downward spiral upward spiral, finding Andre Courier. But before that, actually, and I'm not to try to stay too long on this, but I actually had a run-in with Carl's twin brother, Keith Johnson.
Not a bad run-in.
Not a bad run-in. I was actually out of the military as a department manager for the electronics department at Walmart. And I recognized him, and I was a fangirl at that time. I was fangirling. And I went up to him. I was like, I respect you. I know I watched you on the first 2 seasons of Ghost Hunters. And he, of course, loved that. Both Johnsons love hearing that. Not at all. And I said, what are you looking for? He's like, I'm looking for a recorder. And I was like, for investigating? He's like, yeah. I said, so I gave him some advice on digital recorders. And, our relationship was a Walmart relationship. He'd come in and say hi to me. I'd say hi to him. And then I met Andre. And then that's how I met Carl. But how I basically became a deacon to wrap this up in a quick summary, because that's the best way I can do it. This guy could talk about my life and like memoir. But basically how I found demonology was because of Carl. At the time, him and another individual was running a group called Beyond the Veil Paranormal. And then they had asked me to become their tech manager because I have a technological background. I went to school for computer science. Went to vocational school for Cisco networking. So I had a background in technology, and they asked me to be their tech manager. And then I became under Carl's wing because I was interested in demonology. But faith and the theological aspect of it always fascinated me. So I was a pastor. Then I became a pastoral assistant for the Church of Christ. Then was ordained to the Church of Christ. And then many, many, many years later, I was approached by the Old Catholic Church, the United States Old Catholic Church, to be presented a free seminary program. They offered it to me. And then eventually, after going through seminary, I became ordained to the United States Old Catholic Church as a deacon, office of the diaconate. Currently, I'm not with the church anymore due to political reasons. I separated myself, but I do and will work with them, all Catholic denominations and all Christian denominations and all other faith denominations. But that's a little bit of a rundown of my life and how I got to where I am now, and of course why Carl and I work together.
So before we go to Duo Daemonologie, I want to say one other thing. Yours is a story of really writing your rails, because one thing you didn't say, which I think you're probably a little humble about, you're a really good dad. And I know this, not just because following you guys on Facebook. I know some of the people that know you. I know you're a dedicated dad. I see pictures of you and Carl when you go to things. Your son's with you, Caleb. You have another child on the way. So you righted yourself, not just with faith, but with being a good role model for your sons. You deserve a lot of kudos for that, James.
I appreciate that. One of the things is a lot of people don't realize is there's 2 things I wanted to be when I was a child. And you're going to laugh. One was a police officer, and another one was a priest. And the reason I wanted to become a priest is because I had such a disdain for God. I felt like becoming a priest would give me a better clarity of what God was. And it kind of came true. Like, I didn't ever become a priest, but I became a deacon. And it did give me more clarity. But, yeah, I never wanted to do what my dad did to me. And I feel like I've done justice to my son. And, yes, I have another boy on the way, Dawson, in July. So I appreciate that very much. They are my life. They are the reason that I breathe, the reason that I continue doing this work, because I always want to make them proud, and I always want to show them that you can do good for people, any kind of any pathway, and that's what it's about. It's helping people and being a good person.
Kudos to you, because like I've met you, I listened to you on podcasts. You don't come across as damaged goods. You totally are righted your ship. And you've made yourself into a new, stronger person. And that's, a lot of people have lingering wounds, but you've done a very good job of moving forward and doing the right thing for you. So that's great.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk about Duo Daemonologie, how you guys started that. And there's a third member of the team, too, if you don't mind kind of mentioning that person, and then talk about some of the things that you guys do.
Well, James and I, as he explained, had known each other. My brother met him first, and we were part of the same team for a while, and that just lacked cohesion after a while. Two members moved away, interest faded, but it was good in its time. But James was our tech manager for that group. So we'd see each other from time to time, run into each other, always meant to get together. Then at Ocean State Paracon, which was staged in Harrisville, Rhode Island, at Assembly Theater Ground, near the Conjuring house, James was there, and I approached him, and I was with, by that time I was with my research partner, Elise Giammarco Carlson. And James had an interesting concept about us hooking up and giving structuring a lecture program and going out and maybe intervening in some people's situations, investigating. Sounded good to me. We meant to get together for some time. And it was James's brainchild to form Duo Daemonologie. How can you blow a name like that and negate that? I said, well, you got my vote. I like that. Duo Daemonologie, because it's the two but the three.
Yeah, I was going to say it's Trio Daemonologie now, but okay, yeah.
Well, she's not a demonologist, but
there you go.
Give her respect for what she does.
Yeah, she's an expert researcher. She does title searches. She's investigative skills. And with all due respect to her, I wouldn't buy a ticket to see Trio Daemonologie or Uno Daemonologie. But you got Duo Daemonologie. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I'll go to see those guys.
No, that's great stuff.
I mean, it's nomenclature. It's because it's James and I are the titular demonologist of Duo Daemonologie. And so that's the basic concept of Duo Daemonologie, that we function together. That doesn't mean we do every single thing. We shave in different sinks and all that. But we have very similar views and nearly identical views on approaching a situation.
That was the question. I was going to ask. I was going to ask, how do you guys differ? Were you the mentor, Carl, or did James come with his own thoughts as well in terms of how to approach situations?
What did you say? Was I the mental or the mentalist? That's what he meant.
Mentor.
Mentor. Yes.
Mentor. Yeah. I
was the mentor. Yes, I was James's mentor for a time, and we do learn from each other. I'm still his mentor in a way, but he mentors me. He's always got something interesting going on, and we learn from each other. It's more of a partnership than a mentor-protege system now. Yeah, we just work well together, and we like talking. We come up with theorems and ideas, and we're not just content to see, okay, it's haunted. We think it's a demon, so we must help you. Well, my term for that, as James can tell you, my term for that is what people expect is paranormal paramedics.
Yeah.
They expect the van to pull up and we come out with our equipment, and then their situation is all better. But it's much more complicated than that. We look for the psychological angle. If it's a case that's negative, if it's adjudicated or suspected to be demonic, every time there is things went wrong at a certain point with the individual, let's say. There's always an element of suppressed trauma or seriously unresolved conflict if it's a negative haunting like that, if it's what we think is demonic. There's something in the psyche, something psychological is going on there. It's not just that somebody, suddenly my house is haunted and I think it's demonic. There's always something. And that's what's fascinating about this field, because we get to unravel it. Our mission as Duo Daemonologie is to bring demonology. It's an archaic term, but what else are we going to call it? bring demonology out of the mothballs and cobwebs of the 17th century and usher that into the 21st century, but still keeping the flavor of demonology, because that's what it is. And people sit up and take notice when you say demonology or daemonology. But we want to treat it with a psychological aspect, legitimize it as a viable system of study. Our definition in Duo Daemonologie of demonology is demonology is the systemized study of the lore and cultural traditions of wicked spirits. So that's a broad definition there. That means we study the phenomenon, or related phenomena, which sometimes get classified as demonic.
Normally, people, if they feel they have a possession or something weird going on, they'd call their church or go to their priest, right?
Oh, yeah.
How do people get a hold of you or know to contact you? Is it because they've heard you on Facebook or heard one of your lectures or referrals or all of the above?
Yeah, we're not hard to find. Often persons become disenchanted or disenfranchised with the church system if they're not being helped. They'll say, I have a terrible haunting, or I've had this after me for a long time. The pastor didn't come over. The church doesn't seem interested. Well, the clergy gets busy. They have, many other duties. They can't. It's very difficult being human to concentrate on one person or one family. But that's why we are consulted. They want to get more like a grassroots approach. They want somebody who's going to go there or at least speak with them and really evaluate and give our opinions, our assessment. And so we do serve that function. And they find us through, I think, primarily through Facebook. We've both been on television episodes, so folks know about that. They might come across our website if they do a title search, or a search for demonology, let's say. That will bring them to our avenue. And we're not that hard to find. We're becoming more well-known.
Yeah, your website's demonology.org, by the way, which we'll have in the show notes. But
that's catchy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. Works. I'm going to push this one over to James. So how do you distinguish between troubles of the mind? When you get a new case, you, Carl, on a new case, you meet the people. How do you distinguish between, these guys, it's our mental illness, it's in their head, versus you really have a bona fide demonic, diabolical encounter? Does it take long to sort that out, or how do you figure that out?
Well, one of the things that Duo Daemonologie does, and the one thing that I did for a while, was a questionnaire, 3-point interview phase. I like to call it the 3-point interview phase, because what I do is I send an email questionnaire, then I do the phone interview with basically reviewing the questionnaire, and then I'll do an in-person questionnaire or in-person review of the questionnaire. And basically what I like to do, and when I used to run the Dominion ministry, and we used to use this questionnaire like as our Bible, is one of the things that what it does is if their story changes, you have this documented by the questionnaire or of course, transcribing it. That's one of the reasons, because if they're changing their story, they're not cemented in what reality, they're not cemented in what factually is happening. And at points, that's an intention thing if they change their story a lot. But I think the biggest thing that Carl and I tend to look at is if the individual that is, of course, being afflicted says it's a demon. Because I would say 9 out of 10 times, if there is an individual being either oppressed or possessed, they truly do not know what's going on. And it's an outside influence, like a family member, a friend, or maybe even a paranormal team that was called in to just investigate a location because there was activity going on. But it's never the individual, so to say, that is being afflicted or affected that reaches out, that when it is true of a matter, demonic possession. And I think we use that as well if that ever comes across, in which 90% of the times that's what we get from our clients. They email us saying we're possessed, but that doesn't mean that we detract away from them. That we do the best to consult them. We do the best to peel back the onion and find out the cause and effect of what's going on. And any time that I hear that there's a demon involved, I know Carl and I will always, or at least I specifically will, I can always speak for Carl, but I will always suggest them seeking out a therapist, or if they are speaking to a therapist, to let me talk to their therapist. Because a lot of these people that are dealing with this kind of phenomenon in their reality, in their homes, never bring this up to their psychotherapist or their therapist or their psychologist or psychiatrist. And that's not the greatest thing to do, because if they want help, they need to be transparent and truthful. And if they're not being truthful, which can be found in the questionnaires, then you really have to look at it in a grander scope. Because if they're not being truthful to the people that they speak to for that kind of help, how you know they're going to be truthful to you? So there's a lot of dynamic to it, but usually it's a story. It's the way they're attentive to you. Or I always feel like if the client is always fearful and they have no objectivity to them, then that could be a psychological malady too, because there's clients that call us every day at like 2 a.m. in the morning, and a person of a right mind and objective, they're not going to be calling you 2 a.m. every day. They're going to have some sort of warrior mentality, not play the victim role, and they're going to be strong to their will if they truly were being afflicted. And that's not always the case, but I'm being general. I'm being in generality of it. But those are some things that we look at to kind of differ if this person has a psychological issue, mental health issue, or maybe is truly dealing with some sort of phenomenon. And a lot of the times, even though it could be mental illness, that doesn't detract away from that it could be something, or even they could be creating and projecting their own reality, something like psychokinesis or telekinesis for the older folks, and having this sort of like thought form or projection, tulpa, so on and so on, artificial intelligence being created. And that's another route that Carl and I look at too in the parapsychological sense. So we look at that avenue too. We try to meld a lot of different studies to when we approach individuals, because Carl and I don't always like jumping to the paranormal conclusion. I think we rarely ever do. And if we do, it's because there's enough data and there's enough, of course, experience of ourselves, visual experience, that we've dealt with in that case that we can then jump to that conclusion.
Yeah, you think if something is being purely paranormal, tantamount to supernatural, that's very limited. Yeah. It doesn't give you a lot of options to explore.
So, James, you're studying psychology now. I don't know if you're going to agree on that. Studying that, has that affected your kind of playbook when you go and talk to people? Has there been new angles based on what you're studying right now for psychology versus when you go and you talk to people, what to look for?
Yeah, definitely. I've been lecturing and doing radio interviews for over 11 years. And Carl's been doing it far longer than I have with 50 years of his background. But if you listen to my interviews 9 years ago, 8 years ago, 11 years ago, 10 years ago, I definitely had a different approach. Maybe I was a little bit more imaginative and gullible than I was now, for certain. And I definitely think studying psychology has twisted my mind to more look at the social sciences of it, because even though psychology is developing and social science is not a natural science by any degree, it is still making headway into asking questions what the mind is capable of, what socialization, what the environment can do, aka the nurture versus nurture. So yes, it has expanded my mind to what is quite possible when it comes to nurture and epigenetics and how things are able to develop by stress and anxiety and how it could be emoted out in maybe a paranormal sense. Yeah, I definitely think psychology has melded me more using it in my paranormal studies and my paranormal investigating, because I can start to see the wider scope of why the mind is able to do certain things, or why people are able to do certain things, and why they would want spirits. Humans generate the haunting, and we tend to forget that. And it's not a psychological thing, but that's a cold hard fact.
Yeah, could the demons exist without us? I don't know.
Could spirits exist without us?
What would spirits?
Right? Like they say they're animal spirits, but who would ever recognize that exist if there was not humanity? Like if there was no humans, then there would be human spirits, of course. It doesn't detract away that there could be possible angels and demons, but I think that we are the centerfold. And I know a lot of people say, well, humans think too important of themselves. But in some reality, we are the generation of that haunting. Even Charles Dickens, and I use this widely too much, and I think people maybe get sick of it. Mm-hmm. But even Charles Dickens, one of his first books, or it was a pamphlet, publications, was he wrote the first and ending chapter of a book called A Haunted House. And even in his literature in 1890s, 1880s, and he was a prolific paranormal investigator with the Ghost Club in England. that he even stated that the human element is what creates the haunting. And then from there creates the vibration, creates the force. And I try to use the analogy. It's like putting a battery in a toy. So we're the battery when it comes to a haunted house. And we kind of spoke about that with the Conjuring house and how people go in there, and how the Perron family was that battery at that point in time. You know, five adolescent young females.
Yeah, you had a perfect storm there.
Yeah.
You have the parents, you know, Carolyn, just to interject, Carolyn Perron, who was highly impressionable and suggestible. And it's to her credit sometimes, but she was an impressionable lady. She lived in this magnificent old farmhouse. She has 5 daughters who are also impressionable.
And in their early womanhood.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, you know, threshold of adolescence. So you have that, and things that go bump in the night because the house has a lot of noises.
Yep.
So you had that cauldron of potential haunting there. And would it happen to another family? Maybe not to the same degree, but with them, it became wildfire. It caught on.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they made it up. I'm saying that it manifested through them.
Mm-hmm.
Carl, to you, you have a great history, 50 years of doing this. Is there one case in particular that maybe you don't like to talk about, or you haven't talked about too much publicly, that rattled you a little bit and stays with you?
Yes, there is actually one that doesn't get as much press that I have very mixed feelings about. Was a situation that took place in it was back in 2007 to 2008 in Coventry, Rhode Island, and it was I call that the poltergeist because it was most dominantly a poltergeist case. The reason I don't expound on that very often is because while it has a beginning, it doesn't have a definite ending, like my other situations do. It was while the investigating team was there, and I was called in by Four Seasons Paranormal as the expert testimony. As the demonologist they called in. This was a rare situation where activity was happening right when the family and the investigators were there. Usually hear about, you guys were on the way over and my rosary beads were pulled off, or all hell broke loose after you guys left. Well, it was happening while we were there. Objects were being propelled through the air, crashing. When you heard a crash there, it was probably some crockery or a sugar bowl in the corner that had fallen across the room. And it was freaky. It was confirmation for me. It's valuable because for me it confirmed that a poltergeist can have a voice and can appear, can manifest in visual form. Like it's doing things it's not supposed to do as a poltergeist, but it's doing all of them. Yet a lot of it was classic poltergeist. Talk about a battery. This couple in Coventry had 7 children, all just their own, 7 children of their own. And then by the time I lost touch with them, they had another child. So that's 8. And, all different ages. So they're generating a lot of static there. And the parents would quarrel and then have makeup relations. And, just the mother came from the Azores, the Portuguese islands. And she and her sister owned 10 Ouija boards. 3 they burned, 7 were lost. So you got, I'm thinking what's happening here is the symptom, not the cause of your problems. Yeah. But it's a frustrating case because it was never properly handled. They found out that Carl Johnson was investigating a poltergeist case. So, really no hubris intended. Everybody and his brother were knocking on their door saying, we can help you. We can investigate your house. People trying to claim that. And the investigation was actually commenced by Four Seasons Paranormal. The couple would not take advice or not follow it through consistently. So we really couldn't accomplish a lot, but it was absolutely fascinating to watch this poltergeist activity. If you ever get a chance to watch a poltergeist in action, I highly recommend it. That is the nuts and bolts and the core of paranormal investigation, to watch something like that happen before your eyes and ears. It was very conflicted because, as I said, other groups were coming in saying, we can help you, we'll take over this case. It became very confusing, but the activity was real. That's what counted. It's hard to make a case I did write out the story, though, and I looked at it, I read what I wrote. It's about 800 words, and I said, that's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah.
That's really what happened there. And I have a handful of evidence from that case. In fact, it's tough to photograph a ghost and do it legitimately. It's almost unheard of to photograph a demon. But I believe we did there. Or the homeowner did. Very menacing figure, a very menacing looking face. So it's interesting on several fronts. If I told you the whole story, you'd say, oh my God, they should make a movie out of that.
Yeah, that's what we're thinking. The next thing in the Conjuring franchise. We'll throw the Warrens into it, but it's
yeah, but throw the Warrens on. They saved the day. But it's hard to make a cohesive story out of it. You'd have to change the names and all that because the former homeowners, they're actually driven out of the house. I'm sure they would not cooperate with such an enterprise. But that was it's frustrating to talk about because we really couldn't do anything with it except observe.
Yeah.
The observing was worth it. I just wish we could have gone in and helped these people before they had to leave their house but I was very helpful. Some nights I would come over there and calm them when things were going awry. And if you looked at the lady of the house, Tina, you would think, oh, this is a case of domestic abuse because she usually had a black eye or scratches on her face and arms. But it was what was happening there. I saw her get clobbered by a plate. These things were happening, flying around, and kitchen knife flying through the air but not spinning. It hit the thermal gauge I was holding in my hand, but didn't strike my hand. I don't know. I seemed singled out. I saw the ghost there. Actually witnessed it. Looked like a person, then vanished. My chair with me in it slid back across the floor to the back room, the back wall. It was actually nerve-wracking to be in that house. You're just waiting for the next crash or the next sound of sliding furniture.
So it wasn't demonic? It was just poltergeist, which is a totally different type of entity.
I'll give you my answer to that. People have asked me, well, this case, like you're asking, was this case demonic? Was it poltergeist? Was it human intelligent, indirect? And I say, yes.
Yeah.
It was all of those.
Wow.
It was I'd call it, if I had to encapsulate it, I'd call it the conundrum case.
The perfect storm of the paranormal.
It was. Oh, God.
All right, James, that's going to be a tough one to top, but what about you? You've done a lot of investigations. Do you have a case that kind of sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a case not as to the level of that where it was a human spirit, demonic, and a poltergeist all in one. What I will say is I dealt with the case in Pennsylvania, and it was a back-to-back case. My first case was this gentleman, Kenny, was Paul Davis, and we did a case for D. Dove. Maybe it's not a name recognized anymore, but she was a prolific psychic medium about 8-9 years ago for a lot of people, and investigator, but you can look her up, Facebook, D. Dove. She might still be there. But so the first wasn't really bad. He was claiming a negative spirit. But the second case, and I'm sorry to say, I got to include Rosalind Bound. Rosalind Bound was a part of it. Now she's not Rosalind Bound anymore. I forgot her new married name with her husband, Michael, but she was on Ghost Hunters Academy. And Rosalind was with that first case. But Rosalind decided to go with the second case. D. Devil wasn't there for the second case. But we went to this lady, Amy Mertz's house. And Amy is a sweet woman. I'm still in contact with her to this day. And one of the things that she was having is she was going under these fits of rage, these fits of tantrums, and also upstairs in the attic with no sense of anything dying. They had of course pest control out there. They had their house checked, and one of the things that were occurring is this little round window. I would say about 10 inches big, was always being consumed by flies. They could never look out the window. The window would be consumed by flies. So that was the second case in one weekend. It was back-to-back cases. And while we were at this case, of course, it wasn't as intense as Carl's. But what had happened is Amy did go under a fit or rage while we were there, and I did have to perform a deliverance. And what we did witness was the window being eclipsed by these flies. And of course, being analytical as I can be, I try to smell for a dead animal. I try to sense any way of infiltration of where the flies were able to get in. And you know what the crazy thing is after doing deliverance, and then after doing deliverance, we did a blessing over the house. And you know what was crazy? even though it was within like an hour period of time, after the blessing of the house, guess what had vanished?
Wow.
The flies. The flies were no longer there. They were no longer eclipsing the window. And after that, after the blessing and after the deliverance over Amy, nothing ever happened again. Like, she had some battles of her willpower where she felt like this thing was coming back. But I gave her the installment and the power, and the people that were there as well were also willing to talk to her over time. Also, I can't forget one person that was part of this, and he was a demonologist for a while. He's no longer doing it. But Dominic Ferrenti was also a part of that case. But the window was no longer eclipsed by the flies, and she never had that experience again with the flies after we left. To me, that's not a case I talk about too much, but it was one that, everybody talks about the flies, and I did come across it. I don't know if it was demonic, but it definitely wasn't something nice. And she definitely was under influence and definitely did have a fit of rage, as I said, when the deliverance was there.
No, that's great. You have a new podcast out called True Evil. I was fortunate enough, I put a question in, and Jeff Belanger was on the first one, and he gave me a shout out, and you did too, so thank you. So people should definitely listen to that first episode. But your second one, I listened to last night with Arnie Johnson. That was awesome. I know you have Richard Estrip coming up. This will probably be up maybe a couple days after Richard is up. The Arnie Johnson one was great. You had Tony Spera, who married the Warrens' daughter, on as well. But that's a great show. You want to tell us a little bit about that show and where they can listen in to that?
So, yeah, True Evil is basically a combination between my background in demonology and Laura Brand's background in being a criminologist. She has a forensic psychology degree. She has talked to and studied 55 different serial killers, and actually just came out with a study for academic and law enforcement purposes that shows an updated approach of how to assess serial killers and murderers. So yeah, Laura, very well known as the toolbox killer expert. And we try to know the forces of, is a serial killer evil? Is murder evil? Does evil things make people jump to causing mayhem and destruction through diabolical nature? And we look at it in a grander scope of, is the paranormal a part of why people do the things they do, or is it just because people tend to want to linger in madness? So that's what the show is about. And our next show, like you said, is Richard Estep, who is an author of 28 books, anything from paranormal and how to write a book to the Armed Forces Handbook. He's 28 books in. And, of course, the book that Carl, you can't see, is he also has a book called Serial Killers, which is the minds, methods, and mayhem of history's most notorious murderers. And he actually has a second book coming out in this series. But yeah, we're having him on because if you've ever read his book, Serial Killers, it is such a great book. It goes over a dozen different serial killers, if not more, throughout. How many pages is this thing? 355 pages exactly, beside without the bibliography and all that works cited. But such a great book. We have him on. We're going to talk about serial killers for very first time from the beginning of the show to the end of the show. But yeah, that's what True Evil is. And we have a lot of great guests planned for the upcoming future.
Yeah, I just want to throw in real quickly, the Arnie Johnson show. I mean, you guys covered how that movie that came out, The Devil Made Me Do It, and they kind of talked about a little bit what was accurate and what wasn't accurate, and then a lot wasn't accurate in that film. And it was really interesting to hear Tony Spera kind of set up how he met his wife and then how he met Arnie and kind of how that all went down. And Richard Estrip one is great, but also, man, they should binge all of them because the second one was really good too.
I appreciate that. And you can find that on YouTube. You can find that on Spotify, Apple Music, Facebook. There's many different platforms you can find that podcast on. But yeah, people, please listen to it. Even Carl and I, even though we haven't done an episode in a while, which I'm looking at you, Carl.
Yeah,
it's his next turn to make the topic. We come up with topics. We both change topics, ideas, and we also have, of course, our own podcast, Duo Daemonologie podcast, which is found on YouTube and Facebook, and also our website. But I think we have over 28 episodes. Richard Estep has 28 books, but we have about 28 episodes that we've recorded since 2019, which covers every piece of topic that we probably could talk about. Maybe there's more, of course. We'll see.
We'll find out.
but spirit photography, werewolves, vampires, witches, mediums.
Alien abductions and demons.
Yeah. We've talked about parapsychology. We've had Nick Roth on talk about his experiences recording and any experiences he got. We had my good friend Steve DeChave on from the Dead Files. Brandon Alvis to talk about science and paranormal.
You got a good Rolodex. Wow, yeah, it's great stuff. I want to ask you 2 more questions before we go, and then give you a chance to talk about some events that you're going up to, if you don't mind. Each of you could take a shot at it. The first question is, has your faith, I think both of you have it sounds like you have a strong degree of faith. Has your faith ever waned in the past 20 years or so while you've been doing this? Carl, if you a little bit longer. We'll start with you first. Based on what you've been doing, have you seen something that made you ever question your faith, or has your faith only gotten stronger?
Day by day, I see things that question my faith. I would actually like to say, nope, I haven't wavered. I have human weakness, but my faith is consistent. No. As far as faith or a religious belief, I should be wearing a wooden question mark as a pendant around my neck. Because the answers aren't there. I tend to be analytic. I realize that sometimes having faith transcends logic and logical evaluation. Sometimes you just have to believe, not forcing belief, but sometimes belief comes upon me. I do pray, but it's always being questioned. My faith is not being so much tested. I try to resurrect it, pick it off the ground.
Yeah.
It's there, but I'm not a religious demonologist, nor am I atheistic. Maybe agnostic would apply. It's the unknown and the unknowable. I do look to a higher power, and that's gotten me through sometimes. And some of those situations I mentioned too, I don't go in unarmed, but I don't have a perfect faith. I don't have a conception of faith. It's just I go out on it. It's like walking the plank. I know I'm going to stop before I reach the end. I'm not going to fall off. I'm not going to jump. But that kind of faith.
Interesting. And James, what about you?
My faith has, like I said, it was a 180. I was, like I said, agnostic, maybe even close to being atheist, and 180. But I would say that my faith definitely became stronger in the sense where I came across my first demonic case in Salem, Massachusetts, where it really, truly, at that point, made me realize evil does exist. And that witnessing of that evil, which would probably deter some from their faith and maybe demoralize them and cascade them into a form of mental illness or mental health issues, like maybe depression or anxiety, it really kind of exploded my ability to understand that there are more things that exist in this world, even though, of course, it's hypothetical. But what I experienced was so true into the reality of being what was experienced and documented. So I would say that, like Carl, even though his faith has changed a little bit dramatically than mine, I'd say my faith has become cemented. I don't know what God is. I'm a theologian. I do research and study about God and religions. But in the same sense, I know there is something that exists, and that will never deter me. What it is, I do not know, but I definitely have faith that there is something, and it has definitely become stronger dealing with cases, seeing people have 180s. I cannot say I've witnessed miracles, but I have witnessed people change their mindsets and change the way they believe and have faith and overcome things. I've overcome things. And to me, that means there has to be something. And it is a piece of the limbic system. Faith's a part of the limbic system, and it's there for a reason. Maybe it was genetically implanted over time. One thing what faith does, it's not a demoralizer. Faith is a builder. It builds upon structure of good and structure of goal setting. So to me, it's positive, and my faith has strengthened so much since I've been involved in the paranormal field, since I've been involved with ministry work and demonology for sure.
See, if I was a good interviewer, I would stop right there because that's a positive note. But I have one more question where I think Carl's answer might scare me, but I'm gonna throw it out there. So here's one. So Carl, you first, and then James. Can demons take your soul or only possess your body?
The qualified answer is no, they cannot. They don't have license or power to do that. Some individuals are particularly susceptible and could be taken over, but there's a psychological fissure or weakness in those cases. So the demon itself would not have the power to totally subjugate somebody's personality and do it permanently. There would have to be that weakness in the person's psyche, in their general outlook. So the most basic answer is no. I don't believe they could.
That's good. All right, cool. And James, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree with him. I don't think that the demons ever take the soul. If possession does occur or transient possession ever goes to perfect possession, it's not that the demon takes the soul. It's that the demon kicks out the person's consciousness and takes over the physical body, and then it is able to control the body through its consciousness. So yeah, I don't think anything has anything to do with the soul. But of course, that's a greater, deeper discussion with hamartology, which is the study of sin, and a deeper-rooted question be answered in another show on another topic.
Yeah.
But no, definitely, I have to agree with Carl.
All right, cool. So excellent. So let's close with: is there anything you would like to promote, or any events coming up that you want our audience to know about?
Well, we're making the rounds and make personal appearances at the various paracons, and you'll have to check our website to get a comprehensive view of those. But James and I have been featured, not that it's the high point or the pinnacle of our careers, but we have been featured in television episodes. We each have our own episode this year that has come out on the series The Haunted, A Haunting, I should say.
Yeah, that's a great series, yeah.
A Haunting I think it's the best out there, and which is why we're happy to contribute to it. It's reenactment. The actors portray us, but they are predicated on real-life situations. So please tune into them, A Haunting. Many fascinating episodes. You don't have to stop with just ours, but James's episode is titled The Devil's Doll. And I think James could take the better part of an episode explaining that episode. And mine is called Inner Demons, and it's a melding of psychological and parapsychological areas that come to light.
Yeah, that's on Discovery Plus. It's worth the the trial period of 99 cents a month. Just get Discovery Plus and check these guys out.
It's worth it. Yeah, these episodes they have happy endings, but they raise more questions than they answer, like Paranormal Investigation does typically.
James, anything else that you'd like to promote? Are there any books or any other events, or just want to throw out your website one more time?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I definitely want to promote Carl's book, Shadow Realms Demonology Handbook. It's a great book. Please pick it up if you're interested. But also, like Carl said, we do have a lot of events coming up. He was just announced for Warren's Paracon, October 29th. I can't give an announcement yet, but look forward to that. But we also have it's sold out, but April 23rd, we are going to be speaking at EnigmaCon at St. Albans Sanatorium in Franklin, Virginia.
It's in Virginia. Franklin. Rings a bell.
We have that, but we also have a very busy schedule coming up. There was actually a story I was going to tell about instead of the Pennsylvania case, but we have May 7th. It hasn't been announced yet, so we're announcing it on the show right now.
Excellent.
May 7th, we will be doing an event at USS Salem that is presented by the Greater Boston Paranormal Associates. They're presenting Duo Daemonologie, and we are giving a lecture and investigation on the USS Salem May 7th.
May 7th.
So make sure you look forward to that. Tickets should be on sale within the next week, actually. So look forward to that.
Excellent. Thank you both, Carl and James, for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. I loved hearing from you. Would love to have you back.
My pleasure.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.